All right, friends, let's get into it. So, welcome to Goals That Stick. Today, we're going to be talking about how to balance our ambition that we have around our goals with making it easier on ourselves so that we're not burning out and losing consistency and getting to a point where we are maybe feeling resentful of our goals or that we, just drop them all together. So, if you'd like, feel free to drop in the chat why you're here today or what you're hoping to get out of our time together. And in particular, if you've ever set a goal and felt it either burned you out or somehow took over your life in a way that you did not appreciate, you can feel free to share that as well. And so I just want to first, whether you're an overachiever, an ambitious darling, go-getter, or just someone who's trying to do all the things all the time, I want to acknowledge you for being here, for showing up for yourself. And, because there's something that drew you here today, something that maybe you're hoping to answer for yourself or something that you wanted to understand more fully. And so I hope that that some of that manifests for you today in our time together. So if you are here live, you're going to want to make sure that you have some things to take notes with, something to fidget with, maybe a drink or a snack. I have my usual 2 drinks and then just minimize some distractions so that you can be present. We're not going to, be spending tons and tons of time. So try your best to be here and commit to this little bit of time that we have so that you can be you can be in the process. And again, so I'm keeping an eye on the chat, which is over here on my phone. So if there's anything that you need to give me a heads up about, feel free to do so. I'm just submitting in the chat now is a link to the PDF that goes with the workshop today. And you don't need it to participate in the workshop, but you may want to have it for afterwards, just to reference some of the things that we talked about. And the link is also in the description for this workshop. So you can also in the chat, feel free to ask any questions at any point if you have any, and I'll do my best to stay on top of the chat as well. And so just to officially introduce myself, I'm Asia. I am a multi-passionate ADHDer, ADHDer, recovering perfectionist, very hyper-focused, achievement-driven person most of my life. And a lot of that I am working on getting to the other side of. So, there was so much burnout and stress, and despite doing so much, I was feeling unfulfilled and not really getting the results that I wanted. And so as a coach, which I've been doing for a little over 6 years now, it's been really great to work with people around goals and accountability and generating momentum towards the things that they really want to do. And I find this work so fun and fulfilling, and I'm really grateful to have you here today. And hope that I can impart some knowledge and also learn from you. So just a little bit of what we're going through today. So, I've talked a lot about goals and have been doing goals related workshops for over 6 years. And this is stuff I talk to my clients about a lot. So I'm hoping that at the end of this hour that you'll have a bit more clarity with how you can set goals that are meaningful to you, and some actionable strategies that will help you to move towards achieving those goals in a way that is sustainable and kind of factors in who you are as a whole person. And, as you kind of process everything from today, things will sink in, and it's not all going to happen all at once, but you do have access to this recording here on the channel. It will be in the recorded workshops playlist, so you can always go back to it if there's anything you want to revisit. And so we're just going to kind of talk about ambition and ease, kind of look at what it would be like to take a new perspective on goal setting, and also defining what success looks like for you and mapping out your path. And so before we get into everything, I just want to invite you to take a nice deep breath, just to get centered and grounded before we move on. I also like to sometimes do a little bit of wiggling or stretching, so feel free to do that if that feels good for you. All right. So, ambition and ease. Talking about these two things is something that I see a lot in my practice. I work with a lot of ambitious individuals, and I find that we have a need and often a desire to balance our ambitious striving side with the side that kind of just wants to exist and enjoy life. And I find that that happens more the older that we get. At least that's been my personal experience. And so when we look at goal setting, kind of from a perspective of ambition, we see really big goals. We see this kind of driven, consistent pursuit, maybe a narrow focus. We have our goals are more urgent, maybe more challenging. And an easeful approach, might have a bigger mix of goals, goals that are more flexible, goals that are more holistic and more balanced. And maybe they're a slower approach to achieving those goals, or to kind of defining what done looks like for some of those things. And what I'm seeing in my clients and even in myself is just more of a need to explore and understand these different parts of ourselves. And there's probably more parts than this, more than just our ambitious side and more than just this easeful side. But, there is a tension there between, these big goals and this kind of driven, focused part, and this part that wants to not be striving so hard all the time for everything. And so I think that, again, as I think, especially, whether it's that we're getting older or our priorities shift, at different stages, finding some way to balance the two is really helpful and also challenging, because our society does not really our society doesn't really support having an easeful approach to goals. Being in that more ambitious lane is applauded and celebrated. And so that kind of brings me to my next point here about what's wrong with traditional goals. I did just post a video about this, particularly particularly as had traditional goals kind of relate to ADHD. But I think that traditional goals is where our innate ambition can steer us in the wrong direction, because they can really, especially for those of us who have ADHD, can really fire up our all or nothing thinking, because traditional goal setting, and here I'm kind of thinking about SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, or timely. They can feel too rigid. They can run the risk of being too specific. And so all of this can allow us to tap into perfectionism that we probably don't need any help getting into. So, and they become very productivity oriented and very outcome focused. And I think that there is a place for that kind of specificity and potentially rigidity. But I think if we apply that same thinking to all the goals that we're working towards, we might get ourselves into kind of a trap here. So, just using a sort of running example, a traditional goal might focus just on running a marathon without considering, what the impacts to your schedule would be, or what the process would feel like, and how you wanted it to feel. One other example I was thinking about was a client who wanted to just kind of maintain a certain amount of activity in their week. And they're like, oh, I like riding my bike. I want to ride my bike 3 times a week. And so I was like, okay, great. So if you rode your bike one day this week and you were sick another day, so you didn't ride that day, and it was raining the 3rd day, did you fail? And they were like, yeah. And so this is where that all or nothing thinking can get in our way, right? We can get in our own way because we get trapped in this, well, I said I was going to ride my bike 3 times, and the other 2 days, some elements outside of my control came in. And so therefore I have failed my goal and I failed myself. And then we get into this kind of like negative thinking spiral, right? So, you know, traditional goals also sometimes encourage having big goals. And I think big goals are important because they give us something to really work towards. They give us something that is challenging for us, which is important, especially, for those of us with ADHD, because we need that. We have that interest-based nervous system, and challenge is something that generates interest for us. And at the same time, too much challenge or too much focus can come at the cost of balance or enjoyment of the actual process. And so I want to, kind of tie this into like, how does this look if we kind of are thinking about holistic goal setting or more of a values based goal setting? And to me, that's the other side of exploring. When we're talking about traditional goals versus what's the other alternative? Like if we're not using a SMART goal or something in this more traditional lane, what other choices do we have? And so I want to encourage you to think about values-based goals and aligning your goals with what really matters to you. Like a sort of maybe trite example is like, I want to get promoted in my job, but maybe I want to contribute meaningfully in my workplace, or I want to grow as a leader, or I want to, I want to do my work in a way that aligns with my bigger goals or bigger values. So, a more holistic view of goal setting is one that is more values based, incorporates more flexibility, is more process focused. So, is more thinking about process type of goals versus outcome types of goals. So it's not just what's the end result, but also what am I getting out of the experience? And process goals, typically something like I want to study Spanish, do my Spanish studying 3 times a week. And that's just more of like a thing that you want to become a habit. You want to become integrated. Whereas an outcome goal would be, I want to be bilingual in Spanish. And that is something that is that going to take 1 year? Is it going to take 10 years? So it has a little bit less. Becoming bilingual is more rigid and harder to define in some ways, whereas the process goal allows us to kind of just maintain, this is a maintenance goal. I'm rambling. So the other thing here is like also meaningful metrics. So a lot of goals that people set, especially when you think of like very kind of common goals that people have around their physical health, or or things that they want to achieve at work, or things that have certain amounts of numbers attached to them. Sometimes those numbers don't mean anything. Like you want to have a certain number of followers on on Instagram or someplace. Like what does that actually mean? Does having 1,000 people meaningfully different than 2,000? Like what are all of those things mean to you? So make sure that if you are attaching metrics to things, that they're something that have some sort of significance and importance to you personally. So then, consider what what lies at the intersection of your values and your desires. So, this is thinking about like what really lights you up. Where does that ambition that you have meet the purpose of things that you, that are core to who you are and how you want to show up and operate in the world. And so this is just something to reflect on, like what is at that intersection for you of your values and your desires? Because that's a really interesting place to set goals from. And I've talked about in several goal workshops I've done over the years, talking about a portfolio of goals. And so this is, thinking about diversifying your goals. A lot of our goals tend to live in this kind of personal growth space, financial space, or like business and career space. And usually like physical health pops up quite a bit too. So those top few are where a lot of goals fall in. But we can have goals in all areas of our life, and those goals can look lots of different ways. So we can have goals around our fun and our joy and our adventure. We can have goals around our relationships. around how we want to contribute to our community or to organizations that are important to us. So there's all different kinds of ways that you can, like all different kinds of goals that you can create. And this is really where having those values, like thinking about what your values are and aligning those goals with your values allows you to kind of create a different targets and different ways that you want to be consistent in these different areas, so that you are meeting more of your values in your kind of day to day and week to week. So then thinking about one of the next things that's important when we're talking about our ambition in particular, because our ambition is a little sneaky. So is how do you define success? This is so important because we are often guilty of not being clear on what our actual metric of success is. And so when, things come too easily or too quickly, we'll push the finish line further out because it's like, oh, well, I didn't expect to be done so soon. I'll just, put that finish line further away. Or maybe the results that we were aiming for wasn't as satisfying as we imagined it would be. So we discount that achievement and then we push the finish line further out again. And, or we let other people define success for us. And that could be people we're close to. It could be people that influenced us in the past that maybe don't have a bearing on what we're doing today. We let those other people define what success is for us. And sometimes we define success based on people we don't know. Maybe it's people we look up to. And, or maybe there's some other circumstances of how we feel we should be. And so defining success based on those terms is risky. And this can be problematic for any of us, particularly in any marginalized groups, because we have internalized what is normal and we're trying to live up to standards that aren't compatible with our existence on some like basic fundamental level. And so just check yourself about how you define success, both broadly, but also when it comes to the specific goals that you are working towards. And so a couple of questions that can help you dig into this a bit further are like, what does success feel like? What does it look like for you? And is that version of success your choice? Is that what you want? And there are some additional reflection questions around success in that PDF. So you'll have some things you can explore there. And so the idea here around success is really just making sure that you define your finish line in the way that is meaningful to you and that it is your choice. All right. All right. So mapping your path. So one of the things here that I think can help us to balance out that ease and ambition is around setting milestones that will help you identify yourself moving forward. So this is, breaking your goal into manageable steps and having regular opportunities where you're checking in. And so I've just used the 30, 60, 90 days example here, but it doesn't have to be those specific intervals. Breaking your goal into manageable steps. So this might be like if you're trying to write a book, if that's a goal that you have, maybe your first milestone is to write 3,000 words. Now, depending on how much time you have to devote to it, how many ideas you have, how, swift you are as a runner or as a writer, 30 days, maybe you say, well, in 30 days, I want to write 3,000 words. And in 60 days, I want to have a really rough first draft. And in 90 days, maybe I want to share a revised draft with someone for feedback. And I think that's a bit of an aggressive approach, but maybe you have the space for it. Maybe that's what you want to do. So just thinking about like, what are the milestones that are going to show that you're making progress? And I think it's really important for some of those early milestones to be a little quicker. So I put 30 days here, but I think depending on what you're working towards, you may want to have a check-in at 10 days or 15 days. Um, and you might want to make those earlier milestones a little bit easier to achieve, just so that you can start to build momentum. Those quick wins will give you some dopamine that will help you continue forward, and you'll see that you're building up to what your ultimate goal is. And so again, in the PDF, there's a template to kind of help you explore your milestones. And the thing here is, like, your milestones can change and they can shift. And so you may not, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that if you have a really long-term project, that you book out milestones all the way, at least not attached to certain amounts of time, because as we're about to explore, things happen. So we all know this. Obstacles come up. Thinking about your obstacles and the challenges and the things that can get in the way is a really important part of goal setting that I think is not talked about often enough. Because if your ambitious side is very activated, that part is probably not thinking very much about the things that are going to get in the way and how to plan around them. They're feeling very like, I can do anything. Let's freaking go. So I thinking as a part of your goal setting process, as a part of reviewing your goals, thinking about what might get in the way is going to be really helpful, because it helps you plan ahead. So, identifying your obstacles is like, what might get in the way? And when you think about what might get in the way, it's not just practical stuff. So yes, there's external things, like I might run out of time. Things might happen in my life that I don't expect. I might, I might get sick, like all these different things that might throw you off or set you back in some way. But there's also internal obstacles, right? So that might be the way that we talk to ourselves. It might be our fear of failure or our fear of success. It could be perfectionism that gets in the way, or people pleasing. So think through, especially as it relates to the specific goal that you're thinking of, like what are the things that might get in the way? And then also consider, how can I respond or prevent these obstacles? So some stuff is out of our control, so we're not necessarily going to be able to prevent them, but there might be some things we can think about in terms of, how do I want to respond to these obstacles? So using the bike example from earlier, if my kind of ongoing commitment is that I want to ride my bike 3 times a week, and one day I get sick, if I've thought ahead of time that, like, I might get sick and I might not feel well some days, do I get a pass on the day I don't feel well, or do I have to do it anyway? Do I do some gentle stretching? Like, what is allowed? Basically, you're kind of deciding, like, what am I allowed to do when things come up? And I can't tell you how helpful it is to think about this stuff in advance, because we just don't do it. And then we get caught up when these obstacles come up, and we get upset or frustrated, or sometimes we'll give up, because we don't know how to get around that roadblock. So this is really, just like anticipating potential challenges or distractions, and planning how to handle them. And so, thinking about, maybe there's some adjustments that you need to make in order to move forward. Maybe there's a big obstacle that's come up that is now going to be impeding on your schedule or on your energy. And so that's going to require some bigger adjustments. So reassessing these steps and your timelines, and your things that you're trying to commit to, is going to help you stay aligned with what is possible for you right now, and how you can manage yourself and your goals as you're working on these, dealing with these challenges and obstacles. And so with that, I also want to say that it's important to embrace difficulty and challenge as part of the process. It's not going to be smooth sailing. Like, I don't have to tell any of you that things hardly ever go from point A to point Z smoothly, right? So if we can expect challenges, if we can embrace that we're going to have to make some big efforts, some of that difficulty is just the nature of doing the thing, and some of it is things that we can't expect. So those are some things that I think is like a key mindset. I think that does fit into balancing. We think about sticking with our goals and balancing our ambitions with what's easeful, part of ease is having the ability to respond and to be adaptable. And sometimes it's just about and having some anticipation. So it doesn't mean that everything's going to be easy. It's just more that it's like, well, if I know that stuff is going to come up from time to time, whether or not I know what those things are, I'm not going to be completely thrown off when those things come up. And so, just like we define success, it's also important to define doable, or what is possible. And so we don't always know what's possible. We don't always know what we're capable of. We don't always know, especially if we're doing something new, or something that is, we're kind of trying to go to a level we haven't been at before. We don't always know if we can get there, and that's all right. But like doable in this in terms of what I'm thinking about is kind of glimpsing what good enough might be. And so while we don't always know what the best situation is, thinking about what good enough might be is really helpful. So thinking about doable for you, and roping in like how can you be kind to yourself in this kind of goal setting and goal getting process. And so this is, where we're thinking about building consistency. When you're thinking about what's doable, what feels realistic to you, about like what's realistic for you with your energy, with your capacity, with your time. Here's some practical things that you can do. So one is to take your time. So you don't have to do all of it all at once. You don't have to hit it hard right away. You can ease into it, and that's, I think, something that we often don't do because we are so excited and we have a lot of energy when we have a big idea or a goal that we're eager for. Sometimes go really, we just go all in, and I think there's a time and place for that, and so it's not all bad, but I think that can often get us to a point of being like to the other side of just getting burnt out, or just getting tired. And then it makes it hard for us to maintain consistency. And then breaking your goals into smaller, manageable tasks so that they can fit into your current energy, your current resources, your current capacity. Breaking things down is something that gets talked about so much, especially around like ADHD productivity stuff. And so in some ways I'm tired of talking about it because I just feel like everyone's tired of hearing it. But I think it's a really helpful kind of approach, because often we have these goals that are so big or they're vague or we don't really like, we see the thing that we want to write the book, we can see that we want to have this finished result, but what are the things that actually need to happen? And so it's like, well, I need to write the book. I mean, that's a huge thing. So like, can I break it down into chapters? Can I break it down into word counts? Can I break it down into something that feels tangible, that feels like I grasp what that is? And I think about that too with time. I don't know about you, but I always really hated that question of like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I used to think that question would get easier to answer, but honestly, it doesn't. And, I'm like, I like have about this year that I can sort of think about, that I have a sense of, and really from a really real perspective, maybe only the next month or two. So, so thinking about how can you break the goals into bits and pieces that feel really understandable, that you can really grasp what that goal, what that task is for, and you can really see how you could make that happen. So if you ever feel like the things you've broken down are still feeling overwhelming, like maybe you need to break it down a little bit further. And setting flexible timelines. So this is where you can, so one of the things that I think can be really helpful is to kind of take your calendar and think about what are the things that I already know are happening in my life, in these next couple of months or in the time frame of working on this goal? And are there some things that I need to plan around? So with my running clients, because I do coach, most of my runners are training for marathons. They might be working with me for 4 to 6 months training for the marathon. So at the beginning, we'll talk about like, hey, do you have any travel plans? Are there any occasions or anything coming up where you can anticipate not being available? Is there time that you must take off, or that you're going to be really busy with work or other obligations? And so that is really helpful, because then we have a sense of one, where maybe are there some like blackout periods, but also where do I need to incorporate more flexibility? So if my runner is traveling, but they're like, well, I can run while I'm traveling, but I may not be able to do the same kind of workouts that I do at home, then we create a flexible routine for them to do while they're on vacation, or wherever they are. So this is a little bit of like thinking about when you have those milestones and you have some of these different tasks, it can be really helpful to set timelines or deadlines for those. But make sure that you've given yourself space for adjustments. Personally, I am talking about this, but I do not succeed very much at this. At this, I find it really challenging to set a deadline and then move it, but or to leave enough space between these different deadlines that I can adjust and not kind of get too back to back. So it may, and those timelines may not be relevant for every kind of goal. Assessing your energy. So this is really, really helpful when we're talking about capacity and what's possible. So yes, there's the things that you know about in your calendar, but if I look at my calendar and I see that I have, yes, I'm traveling, but I'm traveling to a conference, and I'm going to be peopling really hard for a few days, then I know that my energy, I need to think differently about my energy before and after that trip. And then there's also the energy that flows that we all have on a day-to-day basis, week to week, month to month. And so getting more familiar with your energy levels is going to be really helpful with staying consistent and honoring like what your energy and capacity is. So if you're going to have a really busy work period, you're going to have different energy to put towards some of your personal goals, right? So those are some things to think about. If you just like PS side note, sidebar, if you are interested in like more kind of like practical stuff around energy, I did just publish a energy workbook on my website that you can purchase, and it kind of walks you through a bunch of different exercises, and it's only like $8 or $9. So all right. So, and then adjusting actions to match your capacity. So when I say capacity, I'm talking about time, I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about responsibilities and other commitments. So if you need to, this is where that flexibility comes in. So adjust things so that they fit into what is possible for you right now. So if 3 times a week bike riding is no longer possible for me, or not possible for me for the next couple of weeks because of other things going on, then I have to tell myself, and I have to like be really clear that, okay, like I can definitely do 1 bike ride a week. And if I can do more, great. But for this month, 1 bike ride a week is what I'd like to commit to, or what I feel is possible. All right. And so it's important that you stay adaptable and anticipate that you're going to have to switch some things around. And this is where I think that, kind of thinking about ambition and ease is really important, because if we don't have these things we can anticipate that things are going to shift, then we can get really het up, which is a phrase that my partners taught me, English phrase. It's kind of get like all worked up about what, when these things change. And I think especially if you are autistic or ADHD, we have a lot of rigidity in how we manage our schedules and our routines. And so when things shift, that can be really challenging. So the more we can sort of emotionally prepare, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, the more we can like sort of mentally and emotionally prepare, that's going to really benefit us. And so, the other way of thinking about consistency without burnout is a mindset approach. So we just talked about some practical things, but there's a sort of mindset piece, and so this helps us decouple the ambition, all that ambitious energy we have from from productivity, from just like straight doing stuff. So here, thinking about, we want to stay curious. So um, sometimes it's like, I don't know what's possible. Let me see what I can do this week. Or I don't really know what my energy is like. Let me just kind of test the edges and see where I'm at. And then also, like we talked about, embracing good enough over perfection. And so this is, thinking about where, we don't have to, everything doesn't have to be done at 100%. It doesn't have to be done at an A level, and not A levels, but grade A level. And so, and I know that can be hard for those of us who are very kind of academic oriented, to think about not giving it our absolute best. But I tell you what, if you're here, you are probably not someone who doesn't try their best almost all the time. And your best is probably like leagues and leaps and bounds beyond other people's best. So your 100% is someone else's like 150%. And I think that's probably true for a lot of things that you do. So think about what a good enough effort would be. I've got a video coming up about half-assing it. So I'm excited to do that one. But this is also thinking about how we can stay flexible and adaptable, and remembering like what's in your control and what isn't. Because you can't do anything about the stuff that's not in your control. You can only manage your reaction and your response. So consider also how you want to adapt and how you want to, how you want to stay nimble in your response. And so, like one thing I was thinking about was journaling. I used to journal a lot. So long ago now, but every year I think I'm gonna do the journaling because I really enjoyed it, and I think I got a lot out of it. And I hear so many people who get a lot out of journaling, so I just feel like it's a thing that I should really try to do. And a few weeks back, I picked up a journal notebook that I have a collection of empty ones, and as we do, and so I started writing in it, and I tried to write in it with no expectation, and it sits on my little side table, and I haven't written in it very much, but if it was a goal of mine to journal every day, that might be a lot from having journaled not at all or hardly at all. So maybe I want to reduce it to 3 times a week or once a week and build from there. And so that's something I didn't mention here, but just like kind of thinking about how you can build on your goals as opposed to having to hit them really hard all at once, which I guess I did talk about. So, and the other thing here is to like lean on external supports and, think about where you can create accountability. So external supports come in lots of different forms. So, it could be an accountability group, it could be a friend, it could be a therapist, a coach, whatever, that is helping to create some accountability for you. And doing that can help kind of alleviate some boredom because you can think together about how to change things when you're running into some of those obstacles, or how you can troubleshoot when you're feeling stuck. But there's also things like apps that you can use to track progress if that feels motivating and helpful. There's also body doubling and body doubling platforms. There's all kinds of things that could be an external support. It could be, an exercise group, if you're, or a running group or something like that, if you're trying to do certain things regularly, a writing group, all these kinds of things. So consider if there's some external supports that you can incorporate into the goals that you're working towards. And then, as I mentioned, like reflecting and reassessing regularly is important. So having, building these like self-reflection routines is going to help so that you can kind of think through is like, is this still working for me? What needs to shift? what do I want to do next? Or what's my next step? And so speaking of next steps, that gets us pretty much to the end here. But, I want to, if you have any specific takeaways or anything, I'd love for you to drop those in the chat. But, and also any questions that you might have. But, I want you to think about, what your goals are. What some of the things that are on your mind to do, to work towards. And I want you to identify, let's just take like a few second quiet moments to identify like what are some of the next steps that you want to take. Or the next like small, tangible, tiny, doable thing that will move you forward towards one of those goals. All right. So you've got your next steps. And, I want to remind you that this is all fluid. There's not like I've set my goals and now I have to, now I just have to move forward with them. You can change this at any time. You can revisit it anytime. And, again, I hope that you can access that PDF and, use some of the reflection questions in there, on a regular basis. All of this comes to goal setting, when it comes to working towards our goals, when it comes to checking ourselves and like, are we being too hard on ourselves? Are we being fair to ourselves? All of that is a practice. All of that takes revisiting. You're not going to get all of this out of 45 minutes of us talking together. So think about how you want to remember to check back in and to revisit, to refine what you're doing. So I want to invite you to share any questions that you have. I'd love to, just share those in the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, whether that's clarification on anything that I shared, or a question you have about, something that you're working through. And while I give you a moment to do that, I want to just, shout out that you're here, and thank you for your attention and for just being here and for spending this bit of time for yourself. And so I hope that if we're not already connected, feel free to connect with me on Instagram or on my website. You can LinkedIn, all the places. So so that'd be great. So any questions that you've got, I'll stick around. And also, I do have a few videos, or I don't know if it's a few, maybe it's two. It's at least two videos, goal setting, goals related videos already up on my channel here. So feel free to check those out if you haven't already. Julia did make a comment that I think this was around exploring how we define success. That these are important questions, how we define success for ourselves as opposed to how others have defined it for us. Yeah, I think that's like a constant thing to be working on, because success is often defined for us, especially in work situations, or depending on the cultures we grew up in, and so sometimes it's hard to decouple what it is that we want or what feels like success for us, as opposed to what other people want for us, even if it's with the best of intentions. All right, friends. Well, if there aren't any questions, we don't need to, just sit here, me staring at the camera. I can't see anybody. But if you think of anything as you reflect on this, feel free to send me an email or message me on one of the platforms, and I will be happy um, to help you out as best I can. So thanks again, everyone, for being here and for your energy and attention. Really appreciate it. And I will see you next time. I don't know what the next time will be, but stay tuned here or on my mailing list, website, and all the places. And when there's something coming up, you'll know about it. All right. Have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you later.